There's a certain quiet tragedy in always being available, like a candle left burning in an empty room. No one notices when it flickers. No one sees when it melts. You give and give and give, until you forget what it felt like to receive without fear. The world praises forgiveness, as if it were always holy, as if saying "I understand" is the same as saying "I'm healed." But sometimes forgiveness is a leash, a soft betrayal of your own blood. A rehearsed surrender passed down through generations of women who were taught to keep the family from falling apart, even if it meant letting themselves shatter in silence. We were raised on apologies we didn't owe, conditioned to believe that keeping the peace was more important than keeping our dignity. That silence was a virtue, even when it was stuffed with unspoken wounds. So you forgive. Not because it feels right, but because you're terrified of becoming the villain in someone else's story. But what if the real betrayal was abandoning yourself to be seen as the bigger person? What if forgiveness, in some cases, is just a more socially acceptable way of self-erasure? Every time you answer a call you didn't want to. Every time you say it's okay when it's not. Every time you become the emotional sponge for someone else's chaos, you pay. Not with money. Not with time. But with energy. Soul energy. And it's always the soft ones who bleed dry. The ones who listen more than they speak. The ones who feel so deeply that they've forgotten where their own edges begin. They become the emergency contact for everyone's crisis, even when they themselves are barely breathing. But no one notices when an empath is dying inside. Because they smile with their wounds stitched shut. They don't cry out, they collapse inward. Constant availability is a slow leak. It looks harmless, even noble. But it's spiritual hemorrhage. To be always reachable is to be always extractable. Your energy becomes common property, a shared resource for those who never learn to sit with their own voids. You become less a person, and more a lighthouse for broken ships. Always shining. Never resting. And in a world addicted to taking, your willingness to give is seen not as grace, but as permission. But let's be clear. Not everyone deserves access to you. Not every call is meant to be answered. Not every wound is yours to tend. To make yourself constantly available is to say to the world, I do not value my sacredness. And sacred things, when treated like convenience, lose their power. Humans are strange creatures. We chase what runs. We worship what withholds. We assign worth not by virtue of goodness, but by the distance it keeps from us. The apple in Eden wasn't sacred because it nourished. It was sacred because it was forbidden. And you? You became too easy to reach. Too ready to understand. Too quick to offer love before it was earned. You were always there, so they stopped seeing you. They stopped feeling you. Because in a world of noise and urgency, presence becomes background. Like the heartbeat, unnoticed until it stops. This is the paradox of generosity. The more you offer without boundary, the less they see it as a gift. Psychologically, we are conditioned to desire what we must work for. Scarcity triggers value. And overexposure breeds blindness. You give your soul on a silver platter, and they start using it as a dinner plate, forgetting that it was ever sacred. Mystique is magnetic. Scarcity creates longing. But you were taught that love meant proving, pleasing, performing. So you never gave them space to miss you. And when they forgot your worth, you blamed yourself. But maybe the issue wasn't your value. Maybe it was your availability. Even gold, when scattered like sand, is mistaken for dust. We are drowning in signals. Wi-Fi, blue ticks, typing bubbles, notifications, red hearts, green dots. And yet, we have never felt so unseen. We mistake accessibility for intimacy. A message at 3 a.m. for care. A like on our grief for presence. But these are just echoes in the canyon of a world too loud to listen. We live in a simulation of connection. A theater of closeness, where everyone plays the role of being there, without ever arriving. You text, they ghost. You reach, they scroll. You open your chest like a cathedral, and they leave after taking a selfie in your ruin. We are not known. We are consumed. In the old days, solitude was sacred. Now, it's suspicious. You disappear for a day and people ask, "Are you okay?" As if vanishing for a moment is proof of dysfunction, rather than healing. But you weren't made to be on call. You weren't meant to be perpetually available, emotionally downloadable like an app. This illusion of connection has made us emotionally bankrupt. Everyone is connected, but no one is bonded. We've mistaken presence for pings, loyalty for likes, love for algorithmic attention. And the more visible you become, the more invisible your soul feels. Sometimes, the truest connection is disconnection. There is a silence that terrifies most people, the silence of their own company. To be alone is to be without distraction, without validation, without the mirrors of others reflecting who you think you are. And that kind of solitude? It doesn't just strip you, it devours you. But inside that devouring, something ancient waits. You begin to hear your own heartbeat again. The rhythm of a soul long drowned out by obligation, noise, and need. And slowly, the illusions fall away, the roles, the masks, the endless performances stitched into your identity. You begin to ask, who am I when no one is watching? Who am I when I'm not trying to be loved? Solitude is not absence. It is presence, pure, undiluted presence with yourself. It is the furnace where false selves are burned to ash. And in that ash, you start to see your true worth, not because someone tells you you're valuable, but because you've finally touched the silence within and found it holy. You learn that your value doesn't increase with your availability. It increases with your alignment. And the deeper you go into yourself, the less you tolerate anything that costs you peace. So let them call you distant. Let them call you hard to reach. A soul that has returned to itself has no need to explain its solitude. Boundaries are not walls. They are doors, with locks, and your hand is on the key. But most of us were taught that love means leaving those doors open, even when we're bleeding. That to say no is to be cruel. That to walk away is to be cold. But listen closely. Detachment is not absence of love. It is the refusal to let love become a weapon. Mystique is not manipulation. It is the protection of what is sacred, the refusal to make your soul a public exhibit for those who haven't earned the price of admission. And boundaries? They are not ultimatums. They are mirrors. They show people how you treat yourself and invite them to do the same. Psychologically, we are drawn to what we cannot easily define. The mysterious commands reverence. The unavailable provokes desire. Even Carl Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But to become that, you must guard yourself from those who only love the version of you that bleeds for them. When you stop explaining yourself, when you let your silence speak, when you pull away instead of pouring more, you shift the power dynamic. You stop orbiting others and become your own center of gravity. You are not here to be consumed. You are here to be witnessed, wholly or not at all. There's a part of you buried beneath every apology you didn't mean, every smile you forced, every silence you swallowed. That part? It's your shadow. Carl Jung taught that the shadow is not evil, it is simply the unlived, the repressed, the rejected gold that we were told was too much, too loud, too angry, too selfish to be loved. So you buried it. You buried your anger, your truth, your wildness, your resistance. You became good, the kind of good that is praised by the broken, the kind that stays and forgives and bends, the kind that never threatens the comfort of others. But inside that shadow is your sovereignty, your spine, your storm. And if you want to be whole again, you must walk back into the dark and dig yourself out of the roles you played to be chosen. Pleasing others is a survival tactic. But survival is not the same as living. Shadow work is not about becoming darker, it's about becoming honest. To reclaim what was exiled in you is to step into your fullness, even if it terrifies those who only knew your fragments. You were not born to be palatable. You were born to be powerful. Not every disappearance is a vanishing. Some are a resurrection. In a world addicted to exposure, to retreat is an act of rebellion, a quiet refusal to be consumed. We forget that monks, mystics, and prophets didn't find truth in the crowd. They found it in caves. Forest silence. Distance. There's a sacred geometry in pulling away. You realign. Your nervous system, once tethered to chaos, begins to breathe. Your energy, once fractured by too many faces, returns to its source. And there, in that solitude, the divine begins to whisper again. Gurdjieff said, "Only those who are capable of being alone can truly love. Because only the soul that knows its own depth can offer anything real to another. Anything that isn't rooted in fear or lack. Withdrawal is not abandonment. It is not passive aggression. It is a sacred ritual of recalibration. You go inward not to escape the world, but to remember you are not it. When you return from this retreat, you do so rooted. Not seeking approval. Not craving attention. Not leaking yourself into anyone who will listen. But standing whole. You do not beg to be understood. You become a mystery, and mysteries are not solved. They are revered. There is a language more ancient than words. It is the language of presence, of restraint, of sacred stillness. Silence, when wielded with intention, is not passive, it is commanding. It is the roar beneath the whisper, the storm behind the closed mouth. In a world addicted to explanations and performance, those who do not over-explain are feared, respected, watched, because mystery disturbs the machinery of manipulation. It disrupts entitlement. Distance teaches reverence. What you can always touch, you take for granted. But what you must reach for, you value. Seneca once wrote, "To be everywhere is to be nowhere." And so, to pull back, to be selective with your energy, your presence, your speech, is to become a force. Not because you seek power, but because you've reclaimed your sovereignty. You are no longer the echo in someone else's story. You are the silence they now notice and feel. Your detachment is not bitterness. It is wisdom. It is the refusal to be weighed down by the chaos of others. When you move in silence, people project their own meaning onto you. And often, that mystery has more gravity than 1,000 words ever could. True presence doesn't shout. It stares. It listens. It knows its own worth. To disappear is not to die. It is to shed the skin of expectation, obligation, and endless noise. When you retreat from the chaos, you create space, a void that calls to your soul's deepest parts. Here, in the absence of distraction, you remember what you lost. Your voice. Your fire. Your longing. The world wants you loud, available, pliable, a ghost in their machine of consumption. But the soul demands solitude. It demands silence. It demands sacred absence so it can grow in ways no spotlight can nurture. Disappearing is an act of radical self-love. It says, "I choose myself, even if the world forgets me." And in that forgetting, paradoxically, you become unforgettable. Your soul does not live in the crowd. It lives in the depths. When you disappear from the noise, you reconnect with the parts of yourself that were drowned out by the expectations of others. You become a wolf in a forest of sheep. Silent. Watching. Unbreakable. You were not made to be remembered by the world. You were made to remember yourself. Let them call you selfish, cold, distant. Let them say you've changed. Because you have. You no longer bleed to feed the hungry. You no longer shrink to fit inside their story. You no longer forgive where there's no repentance, no remorse, no return. You have learned the difference between peace and performance. And you have learned that sometimes forgiveness is not freedom. Sometimes it's self-betrayal. Sometimes it's the lie we tell ourselves to keep from facing the grief of finally letting go. But letting go is not failure. It is initiation. You are not a healer of those who refuse to tend their own wounds. You are not a refuge for those who burn your walls to stay warm. You are a cathedral. And cathedrals do not beg to be entered. They stand. They echo. They endure. So if you must choose between being understood and being whole, choose wholeness. If you must choose between forgiveness and self-respect, choose the mirror, even if it shows you alone. Because one day, in the stillness of your own becoming, you will realize the world never needed to recognize you. You were never here to be seen. You were here to become. You were taught that love means forgiving everything. But sometimes, love means walking away. Sometimes, love means saying, I will no longer betray myself to keep the peace. And if choosing yourself means they forget you, let them, because in the silence they leave behind, you will finally hear your soul speak.